Welcome, weary wanderer, to Windsward. Of all the provinces in Aeternum, at a glance it seems the most serene. To understand the darker truth, today we will be discussing the tragedy of Ichabod Shaw. In Aeternum, obsession can lead to a fate far worse than death. So it was for Ichabod Shaw. When he arrived in Windsward, we know that he found it a charming place. Though it boasted as many abandoned farms as any other province, here was a verdant wonder, a glorious green canopy of trees overlooking the swaying grain below. Obsession can arrive from many sources. For some, it can be found in the hoarding of gold and Azoth. For others, it can be found in the righteous power that Aeternum grants to those who arrive on its shores. For Ichabod Shaw, a man of science and wit rather than brawn, obsession came from a peculiar place, a simple warning. More given to academic study than adventure, his arrival in town was a mundane thing. We know that he was in good spirits, and eager to meet the locals who called such a beautiful province home. Such was his joy that it occasioned him to whistle. Only the briefest of tunes, yet still, we know that it could have been enough. An instant later, a gnarled oak of a man loomed over Ichabod Shaw, brow furrowed with the gravest of expressions, and spoke the words that would doom the scholar. "Enjoy your drink, stranger, but best not be whistling, singing, nor dancing." To an outsider, it must have seemed a silly request, but Ichabod was wise enough to comply. Just a look around and you could see. Everyone in the room was merry enough, but there was no singing or music. Conversation was kept to a low murmur, a drone just on the edge of hearing. Ichabod needed to know more. He followed the one who had given him warning, winning answers to questions through many games of draughts. The townsman's name was Zadok, and he spoke of the dancing plague, a contagious compulsion to gyrate night and day. He spoke of a spreading pandemic, and of people dancing until literal death. Most would ignore such drunken ramblings, but not Ichabod Shaw. In the sober light of day, Zadok knew better than to say any more of local history. So Ichabod took a different route, plying the local farmers with drinks for more information. He learned of an old book, written on the history and legends of the plague, though none would tell him where it could be found. As day waned and night approached, full of questions and beer, Ichabod stepped outside, only to be stopped. Backed up against the wall of an alley by a hulking brute of a man, his breath reeked of spirits and wormwood, and for a moment it seemed that Ichabod would meet a certain end. Instead, the brute whispered a strange question. "Have you heard his music? Have you seen the king in emerald?" Before Ichabod could do anything but stammer, the brutish man ran towards the woods with a giggle that sounded far too childish for his titanic frame. Fear took hold for a moment, but the gnawing questions bit too deep to be denied. Rather than flee, Ichabod spent days going house to house, person to person, conducting interview after interview. Hours were drained, drawing up documents and reviewing what records remained, though Ichabod had found few answers to his burning questions. The dancing plague, if it had happened at all, had been long ago. While time itself is hard to track in this place, the one constant between every story was the cost. A great many had died, and some even suggested in soft whispers that their exhausted bodies had died permanently. Some townsfolk called the plague a punishment, and some gave it a source and a name. They spoke to Ichabod of a mythical figure known as the King in Emerald, who also possessed such strange titles as the Verdant Green and the Music that Eats. The constable in particular made a second mention of the book, though afterwards grew tight-lipped and would say no more. His questioning had drawn attention. Soon, Ichabod found that doors were locked to him, that the locals would no longer suffer his questions. Only the book could possibly have the answers he now sought. It was the next day that Ichabod saw the first dancer. Zadok led him beyond the settlement to the edge of the woods, where the groan and whistle of the wind through the leaves dulls the sounds from below. 3 figures swirled in an elegant dance, limbs moving in harmony to a beat that no one else could hear. Their feet were bloody, the wet smears marking the stamped flat dirt as they spun over and over again. Their faces were delirious smiles, oblivious to the words Ichabod shouted to them. Finding that they could not heed him, Ichabod reached out to them. Only Zadok's quick movement saved him, pulling the scholar away, and only the mention of the book snapped him from the compulsion to study the dancers. We don't fully know where Ichabod went next, but we can hazard a guess. The discovery that the dancing plague was genuine had shaken him to his very core, and curiosity morphed and grew into obsession. Searching for the book occupied all of his waking thoughts. What secrets could it hold? Would it tell what was behind the strange disease? Whatever the answers, we know that he dreamed. He dreamed of a figure resplendent in green, but too awe-inspiring to gaze upon. Its mere presence brought a smile and then a song to Ichabod's lips. But it wasn't quite enough. His song was wrong. The music that eats would not allow the song to fade, and so, with a knife, Ichabod Shaw modified his vocal cords to better sing, the wet red gurgling completing the melody. He wrote of this dream in his journal, left so close to Windsward's northern gate. The locals shunned him, though he hardly noticed. The humming had already started, and if Ichabod harmonized just right, he could almost hear the distant music, like a siren's call pulling him towards the border of the woods. That was the last that any set eyes upon Ichabod Shaw, so if you are traveling through Windsward, beware. Do not sing, do not dance, do not dare even whistle. Once you dance, there is no escaping the grinning oblivion. Have you heard his music? Have you seen the King in Emerald? Hello friends, Bugzug here, and thanks for watching. This is the first in a series of lore videos we will be making covering the various characters, locations, and secrets of New World. If there are any topics you're interested in learning about, let us know in the comment section below. Until next time, Bugzug!